Not every woman who gets abandoned needs a devoted second male lead to save her. When Ethan said, "Just thinking about Olivia's hands touching so much blood makes me disgusted," I realized he'd fallen for the new intern at his company. Calmly, I handed over the divorce papers, because my life was never just about him. But later, when he couldn't find me, Ethan lost his mind. "I'm feeling a bit tired today, not in the mood." Ethan pulled his hand away from mine and turned his back to me. Today was supposed to be the day we'd planned to try for a baby, but now he was rejecting me. Perhaps realizing he'd been too harsh, Ethan turned back and wrapped me in his arms, kissing my forehead gently. "Be good. Get some sleep." Hearing his steady breathing, I knew something was off between us. So the next day, I left the hospital early and arranged a romantic candlelit dinner, hoping to surprise Ethan. But as I stepped into the house, I overheard his conversation with his close friend, Zephyr. Back then, I really loved Olivia. Seeing her used to make me so excited. But now, just thinking about her hands touching all that blood makes me feel disgusted. "Basically, you're just over it," Zephyr said nonchalantly. Ethan didn't deny it. "So, have you made a move on that new secretary? What's her name, Luna?" This time, Ethan stayed silent for a long while. "No way, are you serious?" Zephyr asked, incredulous. Ethan responded in a low voice, almost. "Careful, man. You used to love Olivia so much, everyone could see it. You'd have given up your life for her. Don't go too far and end up ruining everything. If it turns into a chasing your wife back after the funeral situation, no one will be able to help you." Ethan let out a cold laugh. "Do you really think a woman would give up 10 years of her youth so easily?" To Ethan's words sent icy chills down my spine, as if I'd been plunged into a frozen abyss. I thought back to all those times he'd rejected me recently. It wasn't because he was truly tired, it was because he found me disgusting. Those two words pierced into my heart like needles, making it hard to breathe. He clearly understood how precious a woman's 10 years of youth are, and yet he used them as a bargaining chip to hurt me. Luna, that name rang a bell. She was the intern Ethan's company had hired not long ago. I still remember the first time Ethan mentioned her, and the admiration in his eyes was unmistakable. He told me Luna had initially lost out during the interview process to other candidates. But instead of accepting defeat, she begged the interviewers for another chance, almost crying and kneeling. That kind of persistence, he said, was rare among young people these days. Eventually, Ethan felt sorry for her and chose to eliminate a more qualified candidate to hire her instead. When I heard this, I couldn't help but frown. Isn't that just emotional manipulation? Interviews should be judged based on ability, not pity. That's unfair to the other candidates. Ethan reacted unusually harshly, glaring at me. "How can you be so cold-hearted after being a doctor for so long? No compassion at all. Guess I've been shielding you too much." I didn't doubt myself because of his criticism and stuck to my argument. That night, we had a cold war over it. Eventually, Ethan apologized and coaxed me, and we made up. But I never forgot Luna's name. Little did I know, she'd already become Ethan's personal secretary. That was when Ethan stopped sharing things about his job with me. People naturally want to share things. If he wasn't sharing with me, he was sharing with someone else. It turned out every change had left its traces. 3 that night, I lay in bed early and felt the mattress dip behind me. A pair of icy hands wrapped around my waist. I fought the urge to gag and grabbed Ethan's hand as he tried to slide it under my shirt. My voice was cold. "I'm not feeling well." Ethan's movements paused. I could sense he was in the mood, and holding back would be difficult for him. But he didn't force me. Instead, he considerately tucked the blanket around me and went to the bathroom to take care of himself. Of course, he took his phone with him, as he always did lately. At some point, Ethan started bringing his phone into the bathroom every time he went. Soon after, I received a friend request on my phone. The profile picture shocked me. It was Luna. Taking a deep breath, I accepted the request. A screenshot arrived almost immediately. It was a chat between Ethan and Luna, time-stamped to when Ethan had just entered the bathroom. Luna had sent him the name of a hotel and a room number. She'd written, "I don't need you to get divorced. I just want to give my first time to the man I love most. If you don't come, I'll just find someone else. It doesn't matter to me, but don't regret it later." Ethan replied with just 2 words, "Wait for me." As I finished reading, Ethan emerged from the bathroom. "Wife, something came up at work. I need to go handle it." He used this excuse often to leave late at night, and I'd never questioned him because I trusted him. But now I wondered where all those nights spent meeting Luna. "I'll come with you," I said. Ethan froze for a moment, then smiled warmly, gently touching my head. "You're not feeling well, are you? Don't push yourself. I'd be worried if you got sick." "Don't worry, I'll be back soon," Ethan said, not sparing me another glance as he turned and left. I got into my car and quietly followed him. Ethan drove fast, and I almost lost him several times. Luna was waiting for him at the hotel entrance. The moment they saw each other, they embraced and kissed, like lovers who had been apart for too long. Suppressing the bitterness welling up in my heart, I pulled out my phone and took pictures, then even recorded a short video, about 10 seconds long. I watched as they walked into the hotel together. Sitting in my car, I took a moment to compose myself before dialing the number of my former graduate advisor, Professor Leo. He was abroad, and it was morning in his time zone. The call connected. "Professor, does your overseas project still need additional team members?" There was a brief pause on his end before he responded with delight. "Have you made up your mind? If it's you, I'll always have a place." When I graduated from my master's program, Professor Leo had invited me to join him abroad for a prestigious project. It was an incredible opportunity for someone like me. But back then, I chose to stay because of Ethan. Over the years, Professor Leo never gave up trying to persuade me to join him. Each time, I turned him down. The truth is, I always wanted to go. Now, I finally could, without any reservations. I didn't regret the decision I made then. At that time, Olivia wanted to pursue love. Now, Olivia is determined to chase her dreams. Both choices came from following my heart. Professor Leo, and I agreed that I would join him in about a month. When I got home, I pulled out a bottle of wine from the cabinet and began pouring glass after glass. Just one more month and I'd be free. My best friend Mia sent me a message. "How was it? Romantic candlelight dinner, right? I told you, Ethan loves you so much. A little effort on your part and you'd win him over." Everyone said Ethan adored me. I used to believe it too. Turns out, when a man wants to fake love, he can fool everyone. I glanced at the ring on my finger and let out a bitter chuckle. This ring was something Ethan had bought for me after working as a food delivery driver for 3 months. Back then, he and his friends had just started their company, and all their money had gone into the business. To get me a decent ring, Ethan worked at the company during the day and delivered food at night. He barely slept 3 hours a night. One time, he was so exhausted that he dozed off while driving his scooter and crashed onto the road. Luckily, a passing car managed to brake in time. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. When I arrived at the hospital, Ethan's hands and legs were covered in blood, and his clothes were stained red. The moment he saw me, he tried to hide his injured hand behind his back. With tears in my eyes, I asked him why he was doing all this. He awkwardly wiped away my tears. "Silly, it's because I want to marry you as soon as possible. What if someone else takes you away? You're already mine, and I can't bear to let you go." Later, we made a lot of money, and our financial situation improved. But I always wore this ring. Ethan once said he wanted to get me a bigger diamond ring, but I refused. This ring meant more to me than any diamond ever could. I thought about the way Ethan looked when he nervously proposed to me back then. Taking off the ring, I placed it on the dining table. The words he said at the time still rang in my ears, but the man who said them was no longer the same person. And this ring, I no longer needed it. In the middle of the night, Ethan sent me a message. "Honey, there's a complicated issue at work. I probably won't make it home tonight. Don't wait up for me. Get some good rest. I'm with Zephyr right now." So, he had already coordinated with Zephyr. They really were good buddies. I didn't reply. After drinking too much wine, I fell asleep on the couch. In my dream, I saw Ethan the first time we met. We were both college freshmen back then. During orientation, the first thing Ethan said to me was, "Hey, you're really beautiful." What a cheesy pickup line. Because of that, his roommates teased him for an entire year. After that, he frequently messaged me on social media. Even though we weren't in the same major, I somehow ran into him all the time on campus. There were plenty of guys pursuing me in college. At first, I didn't feel anything special for Ethan, but over time, I was moved by his sincerity and enthusiasm. Once we got together, Ethan treated me like a queen. Everyone around me envied how caring my boyfriend was. We stayed together through undergraduate and graduate school. After I graduated from my master's program, Ethan proposed to me. I said yes without hesitation. Ethan hugged me tightly, his eyes red with emotion. Choking up, he said, "Liv, trust me, I'll give you a good life. I'll make sure you never lose." Now I've lost everything, but I can only accept the outcome. The next morning, my phone alarm woke me up. My pillow was soaked with tears. Ethan hadn't come home all night. I told myself it would be the last time I cried for him. I got up and quickly washed up, preparing to head to work. Even though I had decided to resign, I still had patients to see and medical reports to finish today. There was no way I could take the day off. That's the reality of being an adult. No matter how heartbroken you are, you can't forget your responsibilities. Before heading to work, I called a lawyer friend to inquire about the divorce process. There was no melodramatic entanglement or complaints. I didn't need some lovesick second male lead to suddenly appear and rescue me, slapping Ethan in the face. My life was never just about Ethan. I have my own path. Divorce was the only ending I could envision for the two of us. That morning, after submitting my resignation, I went straight to work. The workload was heavy, and the busyness helped me temporarily forget about Ethan. But to my surprise, I didn't have to go looking for him. He came to the hospital on his own. I was about to take some files to the ward to speak with a patient's family when I noticed a familiar figure not far away. It was Ethan, tightly holding the hand of a tear-streaked Luna. The two of them were rushing to the cardiology department, looking anxious. The ward they entered was the one I was headed to. As it turned out, it was Luna's mother who was ill. Seeing her mother's pale face, Luna collapsed in tears by the bedside. Ethan stood beside her, gently patting her back and whispering comforting words. Luna's mother said she had no regrets in life, except for the worry that if she were to leave, her daughter would suffer in this world alone, with no one to take care of her. I raised an eyebrow. The patient I was looking for was indeed Luna's mother. From my records, her condition wasn't as dire as they were making it out to be. Hearing her mother's concerns, Luna immediately chimed in, saying she had a boyfriend and that her mother didn't need to worry. When her mother pressed for details, Luna turned to Ethan with a pleading look. Ethan, without hesitation, wrapped his arm around Luna's waist and spoke naturally. "Auntie, I'm Lulu's boyfriend. Please focus on recovering. I'll take good care of her for you." As he finished, he even looked at Luna with a doting expression. But Luna's mother was still skeptical and insisted they kiss in front of her as proof. This time, Ethan's face froze, and he glanced around nervously. Luna tugged at his shirt with a pleading expression. Ethan hesitated for a moment, but ultimately leaned down and kissed her. Unfazed, I walked into the ward and casually took a photo with my phone. Since I'd decided on divorce, having more evidence on hand wouldn't hurt. When Ethan opened his eyes and saw me, he immediately pushed Luna away. His face went pale, and his eyes were filled with unprecedented panic and fear. "Liv." Luna, who had been pouting moments ago, turned pale upon hearing my name. She looked at me, visibly alarmed. They were clearly terrified I'd make a scene in public. I simply said calmly, "The family member of the patient in bed 3, please come sign these documents." With that, I turned and left the room. Ethan and Luna quickly followed after me. I handed the documents to Luna to fill out. "Your mother just has a blocked artery. She'll undergo a stent placement surgery tomorrow, and she should be able to leave the hospital 3 days post-op. I explained this to her yesterday." Hearing this, Luna's hand trembled, and she shot a guilty look at Ethan. Ethan pressed his lips together and asked, "Why are you working at this hospital? I transferred here over a year ago." Ethan choked on his words, unable to respond. His wife had switched jobs over a year ago, and he hadn't even noticed. It spoke volumes about his level of care. Luna handed me the completed paperwork. When I saw the address she had filled in, I paused. It was the address of the first apartment Ethan and I had lived in together. Ethan had bought the place back then and put it in my name. He had told me at the time, "This place holds all our beautiful memories. From now on, you'll be the sole owner of this house. No other woman will ever have the right to step inside without your consent." Ethan seemed to realize what I had noticed and was about to explain, but Luna beat him to it. "Liv, I'm so sorry. My previous landlord suddenly decided to sell the apartment I was renting. I had nowhere else to go, so Ethan gave me the keys to that house. She looked at me with tearful, pleading eyes. Don't be mad at Ethan. If you want to blame someone, blame me. I looked into Luna's pitiful, youthful eyes. Youth does have a way of eliciting sympathy. How long have you been living there? Luna froze, clearly not expecting me to remain so calm. 2 months. Good. Miss Luna, you should know that the deed to that house is in my name alone. The market rent for that property is $2,000 a month. Please transfer the amount to me in the next couple of days. Also, I'm planning to sell the house soon, so I'd appreciate it if you could move out as quickly as possible. Luna looked to Ethan for help, but he was staring at me, his gaze unwavering. Of course, if Miss Luna doesn't have the money, you can always ask someone else to pay for you. I don't care where the money comes from, as long as I get it. Ethan furrowed his brow and gritted his teeth. Olivia, is this really necessary? You're right, it's not. So when you have time, let's talk about the divorce. At the mention of divorce, I saw a flicker of joy flash across Luna's face. Ethan's expression, however, darkened. Do you really have to take it this far? It was just a favor, just one kiss. Do you have to blow it out of proportion? Oh, so does that mean I can also kiss another man as a favor? Don't you dare, what a hypocrite. I smirked coldly. It seems like you didn't have enough fun at the hotel last night. Don't worry, I'll be moving out today. You're free to take her home and continue your fun. Ethan froze for a moment, his voice hoarse. You know everything? I didn't answer. I'll have my lawyer draft the divorce agreement as soon as possible and send it to you. I was about to leave when Ethan grabbed my hand abruptly. It was then that he noticed I wasn't wearing my wedding ring. Olivia, are you serious? I pulled my hand away and walked off, not planning to argue with him in the hospital. At this point, there was nothing left to talk about except the divorce. Behind me came Ethan's exasperated voice. Olivia, don't regret this. This time, I'm not going to compromise and beg you again. There are plenty of women who'd love to take the role of Mrs. Carter. It's funny how, when someone reaches the peak of absurdity, they can genuinely make you want to laugh. The cheater here was him, yet he had the audacity to question me with such self-righteous confidence. I have no idea where he gets his nerve. That evening, my colleagues threw me a farewell party at a karaoke bar. Everyone was reluctant to see me go, but knowing I had better opportunities ahead, they were sincerely happy for me. On my way back from the restroom, I saw Ethan in the private room next door, surrounded by a few friends. Judging from their conversation, they seemed to be talking about me. Ethan, do you think she's really going to divorce you this time? Honestly, women are like that, spoiled. My wife pulled this before, too. Now she's as obedient as ever. You can't let them get away with it. If it were me, I'd let her stew. If she wants a divorce, let her file. There's still the 30-day cooling-off period. Once she realizes we're not desperate for her, she'll be scared. You can't compare yourselves to Ethan. He's famous for being a wife-obsessed guy. I knew these men's wives. Some of them were secretly using their husbands' money to date younger men, while others stayed for the sake of their children, treating their husbands as long-term meal tickets. As for being the official wife, it was all about securing the maximum benefit for their kids. Women nowadays aren't foolish. No one sacrifices themselves for a worthless man anymore. Ethan had been drinking steadily, his face tense. While the others kept glancing at him nervously, he finally spoke. After all these years, maybe it's time to teach her a lesson. The room buzzed with excitement again after Ethan's remark. Olivia, you're here. Are you looking for Ethan? Come in, he's inside. Before I could react, one of Ethan's friends shoved me into their private room. Ethan saw me, and his expression softened instantly. He loosened his grip on the glass he was holding, although he still kept a stern look, avoiding eye contact. It was then that I noticed every man in the room had 1 or 2 female companions drinking with them except Ethan. Zephyr immediately tried to explain. Olivia, don't misunderstand. These women are here for us, not Ethan. Olivia, come sit. The seat next to Ethan is reserved for you. No one else dares to sit there. Unbeknownst to me, Ethan had moved his jacket from the seat next to him, leaving it empty for me. Zephyr started clearing out the room, sending the female companions away. I quickly stopped him. No need. I came with my colleagues and I'm heading back soon. Besides, Ethan and I are divorcing. This has nothing to do with me. Before I could finish, Ethan interrupted me as if he couldn't bear hearing the word divorce. Olivia, are you done playing? Jokes have their limits. I stared directly at Ethan. I'm not joking. Do you remember what I said the first time you got drunk at a karaoke bar? I meant it. Ethan's face changed at my words. Clearly, he remembered. Back then, Ethan had mistaken another woman for me while drunk and almost kissed her. Thankfully, I arrived in time. I had warned him then. If you ever cross the line, I'll leave you. As I reached the door, I heard the sound of glass shattering behind me. Ethan had smashed his glass. Olivia, you want a divorce, right? Fine. Let's meet at the courthouse tomorrow. Good. That was exactly what I wanted. After the party, I returned to Ethan's house to pack my belongings. Mia had already helped me rent a small place near her home. It wasn't like I'd be staying long anyway. While carrying my suitcase out the door, I ran into Luna, who was helping a drunk Ethan back inside. Our eyes met, and Luna's expression carried a hint of triumph. She placed Ethan on the sofa. Just as she was about to leave, Ethan pulled her into his arms. Baby, I feel awful, hold me. The more Luna struggled, the tighter Ethan held her. Baby, don't leave me. Luna glanced at me, her face flushed with embarrassment. Ethan, please let go of me. Don't do this, there's someone else here. I had no interest in watching their flirtation and left with my suitcase. The next day, I brought the lawyer-drafted divorce papers to finalize the divorce with Ethan. The assets were split evenly, and the process went smoothly. As we left the courthouse, Ethan spoke up. Olivia, are you feeling defeated now? You thought I'd beg you like I used to, didn't you? People have their limits. Don't think I'll keep indulging your unreasonable behavior. I didn't respond. Looking at the divorce papers in my hand, I felt a slight smile form on my lips. In 30 days, Ethan and I would have nothing to do with each other. Ethan frowned. I'll find another place for Luna to stay in the next couple of days. I'll have my assistant send you her rent in a bit. I nodded. All right, I've already packed up your belongings from my place. The rest you can just throw away. Don't forget you'll need to come back in 30 days. I turned to leave, but Ethan suddenly spoke again. Yesterday, it wasn't me who asked Luna to pick me up. I was drunk, and she happened to call. The waiter overheard and called her over. Ethan, you don't need to explain so much to me. This is your personal matter. Ethan's face darkened further. The next day, I boarded a flight to New York. Professor Leo had a 5-day academic forum scheduled there, but he couldn't attend, so he asked me to go in his place. I had been meaning to clear my head anyway, so I agreed. During those 5 days, I learned a lot and met numerous leading figures in the industry. My days were fulfilling, and surprisingly, I didn't think of Ethan even once. See, love isn't as essential as people make it out to be. There are so many more meaningful things in life waiting for me to pursue. The day after I returned, I went straight to work at the hospital. As soon as my shift ended, I noticed Ethan standing not far away. Leaning against a sleek black Maybach, a cigarette between his fingers, his clothes were disheveled, and he looked utterly worn out. A male colleague who had finished work alongside me leaned in and whispered in my ear, "That guy's been waiting here for days. I heard he even asked the security guard about you. When he found out you weren't working, he just waited out here every day." After saying this, my colleague looked at me with concern, clearly wondering if I needed help. I shook my head to signal that I didn't, bid him goodbye, and then turned toward Ethan, who was walking toward me. As he got closer, I noticed the red veins running through his eyes, a clear sign he hadn't slept in days. His face was covered in stubble, which was shocking for someone who used to be borderline obsessive about cleanliness. "Dr. Olivia, you're impressive. Already found your next target so quickly. I wonder how he'll react once he finds out about the 10 years you spent with your ex-husband." Ethan, maybe 10 years felt like a long time to you, but to me, it was nothing. Not getting the reaction he wanted, Ethan's composure began to crack. "Olivia, did you think disappearing for a few days would make me go crazy, desperate to find you? Sorry to disappoint you, I didn't call you once. You can ask your friends. I didn't even bother to ask them where you were. Then, why are you here now?" Ethan was caught off guard by my question, seemingly unsure of the answer himself. It took him a while before he finally said, "You changed the locks on that house. I can't get in." He was referring to the place Luna had been staying in. It seemed Ethan had tried to go there in the past few days. I nodded. Yes, that's my house. I'm planning to sell it. To prevent unwelcome guests from entering, I changed the locks. Ethan looked at me in disbelief. You're really selling it? You're willing to let it go? What's there to hold on to? It's useless to me now. In a few days, the realtor will bring potential buyers to view the property. If you have anything left to retrieve, you can do it then. Hearing me call it useless, Ethan's eyes instantly reddened, a flicker of hurt flashing across his face. In the past, whenever we argued and he showed that wounded expression, all my anger would vanish. I'd end up laughing and trying to comfort him. But those days are long gone. He's no longer the Ethan who would do anything for me, and I'm no longer the Olivia who trusted him with all her heart. His tears may have been for me, but they could just as easily be for someone else. I turned to leave, but Ethan, seemingly unwilling to let me walk away so easily, quickly spoke again. One more thing, the date for picking up the divorce papers. I can't make it. We'll need to reschedule. Finally, there was an expression other than indifference on my face, and Ethan seemed satisfied by that. Ethan, don't joke about this. No matter what, you need to show up at the courthouse that day. I don't have time to waste playing games with you. After all, I had already promised Professor Leo that I'd finalize the divorce and leave the country within a month. I don't want us to end up having to go to court over this. Ethan's smile froze. You really want this divorce so badly. Isn't this what you wanted too? This way, he could be with Luna openly and without guilt. Ethan didn't deny it. We'll see. I'm not entirely sure of my schedule. Satisfied with the anger now visible on my face, Ethan got into his car and drove off. When I got home, I grabbed 2 bottles of wine and headed to Mia's place. Ethan's such a jerk, Mia grumbled, slamming her wine glass down angrily. If I'd known he was like this, I wouldn't have helped him when he proposed to you. I refilled both our glasses, smiling and shaking my head. Who can predict the future? No matter how passionate love starts, in the end, it all depends on each person's conscience. I'm just grateful I realized the truth in time. There's still a chance to turn things around. I heard that during the 5 days you were gone, Ethan didn't even go to work. He handed everything over to Zephyr and spent every day waiting outside the hospital for you. Disappearing for 5 days, and this is what happens. If you actually left the country, wouldn't he go insane? Mia's tone carried a hint of schadenfreude. But how Ethan would react to my departure? That was the last thing on my mind. Right now, all I can think about is how to assist Professor Leo with his experiments after I move abroad, and whether Ethan will bail on me on the day we're supposed to sign the divorce papers. Everything else is irrelevant to me. Mia raised her glass and clinked it against mine. All right, Olivia, our career-driven queen, I love it. The day after that drunken night, I received a call from my realtor. They informed me that the apartment had been sold. The buyer paid in full, not even haggling over the price. I was thrilled finally, some good news. I asked the realtor to expedite the transfer of ownership. The days that followed were a blur of hospital responsibilities and arrangements for my move abroad. Ethan would call me occasionally, but his questions were always trivial, like where his ties or shirts were. After a while, I just stopped answering his calls altogether. If it weren't for the fact that we still needed to finalize the divorce papers, I would have blocked him entirely. Later, Zephyr came to see me. He told me that Luna had been fired by Ethan. He also mentioned that Ethan had been in a bad state lately. He got drunk just yesterday and ended up in a fight. I had no sympathy for his so-called best friend. With a cold expression, I simply said, if he's injured, he should go to the hospital. Telling me won't help. I knew what Zephyr was trying to do, plead Ethan's case. But the issue was never Luna. The mistress might be despicable, and even if she were condemned by everyone, she wasn't deserving of pity. Yet the man who cheated, that was the real root of all evil. Without one mistress, there would still be another. Once a man gets a taste for infidelity, it's not so easy to stop. And I had no interest in being a resentful wife. The day before we were scheduled to finalize the divorce, I was at home packing my luggage. I debated whether I should call Ethan to remind him. I was still mulling it over when, to my surprise, Ethan showed up at my door. He looked furious, his expression dark as he glared at me. Was it you who sent pictures of my affair to my dad? I was completely taken aback. What? Don't play dumb. If it weren't for you telling my dad about my affair, would he have had a heart attack and collapsed at home? If Lulu hadn't found him in time, the consequences could have been disastrous. Only then did I understand what he was accusing me of. My expression darkened. I had considered asking Ethan's father to talk some sense into him, but I'd quickly dismissed the idea because of his heart condition. I didn't want to risk aggravating it. Ethan, if you think I'd risk a patient's life like that, maybe you should see a doctor yourself. I'm a cardiologist. Do you honestly believe I'd joke about something so serious? Before I could finish my sentence, Ethan's fist slammed into the wall behind me. His eyes were filled with anguish. Olivia, you've truly disappointed me this time. I never imagined you'd be this kind of person. You want a divorce, right? Fine, I'll give you what you want. I'll be there on time tomorrow. As I watched Ethan walk away, I felt no urge to explain further. He wouldn't listen to anything I had to say. So be it. If he didn't trust me, there was no point in trying to convince him. At least this mess would finally bring him to the courthouse to finalize the divorce. That was a small win for me. When I walked out of the courthouse the next day, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was as if a heavy weight I'd been carrying in my heart had finally been lifted. Ethan, on the other hand, had a furrowed brow the entire time. He opened his mouth, seemingly about to say something, but his phone rang before he could speak. On the other end, I could hear Luna's anxious voice. It seemed something had happened with Ethan's father. Ethan hung up and hurried away. Before getting into his car, he looked back at me with a complicated expression. Olivia, take some time to reflect. We're not done talking about this. The divorce papers were in my hands. What was left to talk about? Watching his car disappear into the distance, I murmured to myself, Ethan, let's never see each other again. That afternoon, I packed my things and boarded a plane to Germany. In Ethan's eyes, I was probably just throwing a tantrum. He never truly understood me. Once I made up my mind, I never looked back. The first thing I did after landing in Germany was change my SIM card. Apart from my parents and a few close friends, I cut ties with everyone back home. I threw myself wholeheartedly into Professor Leo's research. 2 years later, my team and I were preparing to return home with our latest research findings. Before leaving, I had a phone call with Mia. There's something I never told you, she said. About 6 months after you left, Ethan came to see me. I replied indifferently, and that idiot actually got down on his knees in the office lobby, begging me to tell him where you were. I was so freaked out, I called the police to have him removed. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds dramatic. Hearing about Ethan now, I felt nothing. It was like listening to gossip about a stranger. Exactly right, so pathetic. Now he regrets it? Too late. A cheating scumbag like him deserves everything coming to him. Let's not waste time talking about him. Honestly, I'm more surprised you haven't moved on in all these years. They say the best way to forget one relationship is to dive into another, Mia said with a teasing smile. I chuckled, shaking my head. That's the kind of thing you can't rely on others for, it has to come from within. Ethan taught me the harshest lesson. A man's sincerity is the most unreliable thing in the world. In reality, no one can save you or heal your pain. The ground I've lost, I must reclaim myself. Besides, using someone else to forget another is unfair to the person who comes after. I knew returning meant I'd inevitably run into Ethan. I wasn't planning to avoid him deliberately. What I didn't expect was to see him at the very first industry event I attended after coming back. Ethan stood a short distance away, his eyes bloodshot as if he were on the verge of tears. Ignoring him was my plan, but he grabbed my wrist and pulled me outside. In the garden, Ethan hugged me tightly and muttered countless apologies. I pushed him away repeatedly. Unable to hold back anymore, I splashed my wine onto his face. Snap out of it if you haven't yet. I wouldn't mind calling the police to drag you out of here. Ethan wiped the wine off his face, looking more alert yet utterly dejected. I know everything Luna did her text to you, what she did involving my father. I've already kicked her out of the city. She won't ever appear in our lives again. He paused, his voice trembling. Liv, I know I've wronged you before and I regret it deeply. I smiled faintly. None of that matters to me anymore. Because when love fades, nothing matters. Tears streamed down Ethan's cheeks as he looked at me. Liv, can you come back to me? Not a day has passed in these years when I didn't think of you. I've always loved you. I stared at him coldly. Ethan, don't forget we're divorced. No, I never intended for the divorce to be real. I only wanted to scare you. In my heart, you'll always be my wife." With that, Ethan pulled a necklace from around his neck. To my shock, it was the wedding ring I had left on the dining table 2 years ago. I noticed then that he was still wearing his own wedding band on his ring finger. Honestly, it disgusted me. "Ethan, we ended things 2 years ago. Please stop clinging to me, you're only making me lose any remaining respect I might have for you." My words had no effect on Ethan. After learning I was back, he began showing up in my life constantly, claiming he wanted to win me over again. "I won your heart in college, I can do it again. Liv, this time I won't let you go." I was livid. Do you think I'd fall for the same trap twice? Once was naive, twice would just be stupid. No matter how harsh my words, Ethan refused to give up. I had no choice but to treat him like he was invisible and focus on my work. After all, I was only staying here for a few months, and every day was packed with tasks. One day, Professor Leo went to the hospital to perform surgery on a heart patient. The patient's family had waited a long time to secure a slot with him. The case was particularly complex, and Professor Leo asked me to assist him. The surgery lasted 7 hours, stretching from daylight into the night, but it was finally a success. As Professor Leo spoke briefly with the patient's family afterward, chaos erupted nearby. We heard that an enraged family member, dissatisfied with the hospital's treatment, was charging at us with a knife. We were preparing to retreat when the knife-wielding man sprinted toward us. I instinctively shoved Professor Leo aside, ready to take him down with a swift kick. But before I could act, someone held me tightly. It was Ethan. I struggled to break free, but couldn't. The next moment, the knife plunged straight into Ethan's back. Ethan woke up the next day, just past noon. Seeing me sitting beside his bed, he managed a weak smile. "Liv, don't worry, I'm fine." I responded in a cold tone. "Ethan, are you an idiot? If it weren't for you, I could have taken that man down with one kick." Over the past 2 years abroad, aside from conducting experiments, I had spent my free time learning kickboxing. It was partly to stay fit, and partly because personal safety isn't as guaranteed overseas. Judging by the build of the attacker, he was no match for me. If Ethan hadn't interfered, I'd have subdued him easily. Hearing my words, Ethan's expression turned somber again. "I was just worried you might get hurt. There's no need, and don't think you can use this injury to guilt me into giving you another chance. From the moment you called me disgusting, there's no going back for us." Ethan let out a self-deprecating laugh. "So even if I tell you now that I never slept with Luna, you wouldn't believe me, would you?" He continued bitterly. "I didn't touch her. That night at the hotel, I stopped at the last moment, because I thought of you I couldn't go through with it. Funny when you think about it. In the past, I didn't explain because I was being stubborn. I wanted you to lower your pride, even just once, even if it was just to say something nice to me. But you never did." Ethan pulled a key out of his wallet. "The house you sold 2 years ago, I was the one who bought it. I couldn't bear the thought of someone else owning it. I've been living there for the past 2 years. That house holds all our beautiful memories. Every time I see it, I think of you as if you never left." As Ethan spoke, tears began to stream down his face. This overly emotional display of self-pity made me want to laugh. "Ethan, you're absolutely ridiculous," I said. "Do you really think cheating only counts if it's physical? I saw you, with my own eyes, hugging and kissing her. You told me you thought of me at the last moment. Do you think that would move me? It doesn't. It makes me feel sick." With that, I stood up to leave, but Ethan grabbed my sleeve. His choked voice followed. "Is there really no chance for us anymore?" I coldly shook him off. "Ethan, let's part ways peacefully. Don't make me regret ever loving you." Without looking back, I walked out of the hospital room. Behind me, I heard the sound of a man breaking down into uncontrollable sobs. For the next few days, I didn't visit Ethan at the hospital again. He had plenty of people around him. He didn't need me. Before long, I left the country again. On the plane, Professor Leo was talking about the plans ahead. A group of young people groaned, complaining that they'd aged 10 years in one and that they were losing all their hair. Professor Leo scolded them mercilessly, and I couldn't help but laugh along from the side. I turned to look out at the distant horizon. The road ahead would no longer be confined by the limits of the present. What I longed for was a freer, wider sky. End of the first story. Subscribe to my channel if you like my stories. Don't miss the second exciting story. Story 2. My husband has been stingy with me all his life, never wanting to spend money on me. He asked me to pay for my prenatal checkups using my dowry. For our wedding anniversary, he gave me slippers and an electric kettle. When I discovered his ledger, I realized he had saved millions of dollars. Yet, while I was frantically worrying about our son's tuition fees, he was buying a car and a house in full for his true love. I told him I wanted a divorce. He flew into a rage. This is the money I earned myself. Who I spend it on is none of your business. Even our son chimed in. Why are you making such a fuss? Is money really that important? I nodded and replied firmly, yes, it is. I had just come home from the factory. Today marked Ethan and my 40th wedding anniversary. I gritted my teeth and bought seafood and a cake. Then I went home to wash dishes, sweep the floor, and cook dinner. This routine had been my life for half a century. As I was cleaning the dust off the wedding photo of Ethan and me that hung in the living room, the ledger fell out. Curious, I opened it and immediately recognized Ethan's handwriting. The first page read, expenses on Sophia during our dating period, $859.50. Dowry gold jewelry, $88.88. Sophia's pregnancy and childbirth expenses, $12,569. Below, there was a note. Why did I have to spend so much on her? I need to figure out how to make her use her dowry. I felt a wave of dizziness and almost collapsed on the spot. A mix of confusion, shock, and pain exploded within me. I already knew that the contents of this ledger would completely overturn my understanding of the past decades of my life. Back when I was pregnant, I suffered from severe morning sickness. I had to quit my job and stay home, vomiting endlessly every day. When I finally gave birth, Ethan gave me a bouquet of baby's breath flowers and tearfully told me, Sophia, you've worked so hard. Let's not have any more children after this. Seeing him cry back then made me feel sorry for him. But decades later, as I read his ledger, my eyes landed on an entry written in red ink. The date was the very day I had given birth, March 16, 1993. 89 Lily was sick, bought her favorite baby's breath flowers to cheer her up. She didn't want them, so I gave them to Sophia instead. Something snapped inside me, revealing a corner of the truth, a truth so ugly and absurd. I knew who Lily was. Ethan had talked about her before his first love. Back then, Ethan had laughed and held my hand, saying, when I was young, I mistook impulsiveness for love, but now that I've met you, I know what true compatibility feels like. Sophia, will you walk through life with me? I love you, and I'll work hard to earn a lot of money so you'll never have to suffer. His youthful confession had been heartfelt and passionate. And he did end up earning a lot of money, taking advantage of the internet boom and making millions of dollars. But none of that had been shared with me. During those years when raising a child was most expensive, he came home drunk, hugged me, and sobbed. I'm so sorry, Sophia. The market's been bad lately. After paying the rent and utilities, there's barely anything left. I could only comfort him. It's okay. Once our son starts elementary school, I'll have time to go back to work and help ease the burden. But by that point, his monthly salary had already grown to $50,000. Meanwhile, after years of staying home to raise our child, I found it difficult to re-enter the workforce. I could only find a job on an assembly line, earning $3,000 a month to barely keep our household afloat. Tears splashed onto my cracked hands, and I wiped them away fiercely. I had to keep reading to see what else he had written. The entries recorded in black ink detailed the money spent on me, my birthday, $600 for a washing machine. 1 week later, in red ink, $1,700 for a gold bracelet for Lily. For Sophia, $19.99 postpartum incontinence repair, which I don't understand the need for. For Lily, $82.77 she wanted skincare products, had to make it happen. For Sophia, $520 transferred for our 5th wedding anniversary. For Lily, she seemed unhappy lately, took her to Miami for a few days, the happiness was overwhelming, lost track of the expenses. For Lily, $18.99 booked a luxury suite. Women shouldn't have to pay for accommodations, crossed out her share. Over time, as I started working and took on most of the household expenses and our son's living costs, the ledger recorded fewer and fewer entries for me. Meanwhile, the entries in red ink for Lily grew more frequent. Each one, whether it was tens of thousands for a house or car, or smaller amounts for babies' breath flowers and fruit platters, was like a net tightening around me, suffocating me. The occasional entries for me were like cruel glimpses into my own ignorance and naivety. I was crushed, unable to get back up. I couldn't even cry. I raised my hand and slapped myself hard, finally letting out a few sobs of anguish. Why? Why did he treat me like this? Had my decades of devotion been nothing but a joke? While I was working tirelessly for our family, my husband had been enjoying freedom and romance abroad with his first love. So what am I to him? I cried until my back ached, unable to straighten up. It was a lingering aftereffect from the epidural during childbirth, compounded by years of overexertion. It never truly healed. My heart felt as though it had shattered into 1,000 pieces. When Ethan came home, I was sitting in the living room. The old ceiling fan creaked as it turned, as if it might break down at any moment. Ethan frowned, and it wasn't until he saw the table full of cold food and a forgotten cake that he seemed to realize something. He casually said, "Oh, I forgot today was our wedding anniversary. A friend asked me out for drinks, so I came home late." I interrupted him. "I told you days ago that the air conditioner is broken. When are you planning to fix it?" "Didn't I already tell you? I don't have money right now. I'll take care of it after my pension payment comes in. Why are you in such a rush?" Hearing this, I forced a tired smile. Looking at the man who had been my husband for decades, for the first time, he felt like a complete stranger to me. I said, "Let's get a divorce." The fan continued its creaky rotation, sending a chilly draft that seeped into my very bones. The pain made me feel startlingly awake. Ethan was momentarily speechless. He dropped his keys and snapped impatiently, "What is it now? I was just a little late coming home. Haven't I spent every other anniversary with you, buying you gifts?" I pointed at the worn-out furniture in our living room, my anger rising. "The gifts you're talking about, are those the air conditioner, the refrigerator, and the electric kettle? Aren't you tired of being so miserly?" "Well, what do you want then? Just tell me instead of always making me guess besides. Didn't you say you liked practical things?" "I don't want to argue with you. Just tell me what you want, and I'll go buy it right now." "Is that good enough for you?" "I want a divorce." I stood up abruptly, raising my voice as if trying to release decades of pent-up frustration. I threw the old ledger book at Ethan's feet. "You cheated on me. You've been lying to me for 40 years. Ethan, you are nothing but a complete scumbag. I've spent my whole life tirelessly taking care of this family. Do you think this is fair to me?" While I was breaking my back trying to scrape together a few $1,000s for our child's school fees, what were you doing? You were off having an affair, were you too feeling smug about it? I wanted to scream, but I was too exhausted. I was in my 60s now, and the burden of keeping this family afloat had long since broken me. I even looked older than Ethan. After all, that rotten man had drained me of my energy, leaving me to wither while he thrived, free to enjoy life without a care. Ethan picked up the ledger book, staring at it in disbelief. "How did you find out? Over something so trivial? Fine, I admit it. I spent money on Lily, but it was money I earned." He paced back and forth, visibly agitated, like someone whose secrets had been exposed. I said nothing. Suddenly, Ethan stormed into the bedroom, rummaging through drawers and cabinets. Eventually, he pulled out a bank card I had never seen before and slammed it onto the table. "Isn't it money you want? After all, you work yourself to death every month for just a few $1,000s. Fine, I'll split this with you. It's more than you could ever earn in your lifetime. I promise I won't see Lily again. Let's just end this here, okay?" I could see the irritation and panic in his eyes all too clearly. I shook my head. "This is far from over. If you don't agree, I'll file for divorce and demand the return of all the marital assets you squandered over the years." Ethan pointed a trembling finger at me, his face red with anger, and then stormed out, slamming the door behind him. When our son William and his wife arrived, I was eating a plate of cold leftovers. After all, the seafood had been expensive. It couldn't go to waste. William's wife approached me cautiously, her voice tentative. "Mom, what's going on between you and Dad? He just came to us, furious, saying you want a divorce." William chimed in hesitantly, "You and Dad have been together for most of your lives. Isn't there anything you can talk through calmly?" I put down my fork, suddenly finding the meal in front of me entirely unappetizing. "Your father cheated on me," I said, my tone flat, as if I were recounting someone else's story. My daughter-in-law fidgeted and said nothing, not even looking surprised. Instead, she let out a small sigh. In that instant, I understood. So they had known all along. Everyone had known except me. I had been the only one kept in the dark, while everyone else had conspired to hide it from me. William was silent for a few moments before attempting to console me. "Mom, you've lived most of your life already. Can't you see that relationships between men and women are just like that? Look at Mrs. Johnson from the park. She's still dancing with Mr. Thompson every evening. That's just how people are. Besides, Dad's not young anymore. From now on, he'll only have you to rely on. Why not just forgive him for being foolish in the past?" I stared coldly at the son I had raised, a deep sadness welling up inside me. "I didn't expect you to be a paragon of virtue, but I thought you'd at least have some compassion for your mother. I never imagined you'd say something so disgraceful." "You," William's face turned red. "From the time you were a child, every meal you ate, every piece of clothing you wore, it was all paid for with the money I earned through hard work. Meanwhile, your father was lying to me about being broke, spending money lavishly on another woman. Did he ever consider us?" William remained silent for a long moment, then spoke as if in defiance. "Fine, I'll be honest with you, Mom. The little money you made back then wasn't enough to cover my expenses. It was Dad who secretly gave me extra. All the big money in the family comes from my dad. He can play around however he likes. Yeah, you've worked hard too. Now that you've quit, why don't you just relax and enjoy life at home?" Hearing those words, it felt like a crack had opened in my heart. Memories turned into a biting wind, relentlessly cutting into me. I still remember when William was a child, I wanted to give him the best of everything. I recall one time he told me that his classmates were all signing up for a school trip, and he wanted to join them. The fee was a few $100s. I was strapped for cash and worried he'd feel left out if he didn't go, so I worked overtime, day and night, to make it happen. I often felt guilty for not being able to provide William with better material conditions. Later, when he went to college, he got a brand new tablet and smartphone. I asked him where he got the money and if his living expenses were enough. He quickly stashed the items away and casually replied that he earned the money through a part-time job. Ethan overheard and chimed in with a laugh. "The kids become responsible, but you should be careful, don't let your roommates get jealous." The two of them exchanged a knowing look, fully understanding the subtext. Meanwhile, I was left in the dark. It turned out every little thing I hadn't noticed was steeped in lies. As if finally giving voice to years of hidden secrets, William let loose entirely. "Honestly, Mom, it's because you're always out and never home that Dad felt lonely and sought companionship elsewhere. You two have been together for so many years. In the end, you'll be buried side by side anyway. What's the point of getting a divorce now? Just make do and get through it." He shrugged, as if he were the only clear-headed person in a world of fools. "Do you really have to insist on making such a big deal out of this, embarrassing everyone?" I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up and threw the leftover food on the table right at his face. The sound of plates shattering echoed through the room, accompanied by William's furious roar. "Mom, what's wrong with you? Why do you always act like a crazy woman?" His wife, startled by the sudden outburst, rushed over to pull him back, trying to calm him down. William pointed a shaking finger at me, breathing heavily like an enraged bull. "I can't talk to you anymore. You're in your 60s, almost 70, and you still don't understand basic logic. Why are you taking it out on me? Fine, think it through on your own." With that, he grabbed his wife and left in a hurry. Finally, the house fell silent again. I looked at the mess around me. Any lingering attachment I had to this family was gone. I turned and went to my room, quickly packing all my belongings, including my documents and bank cards. Shutting the door behind me, the house I'd lived in for decades now felt hollow and empty. The untouched cake on the table would eventually rot. I didn't care anymore. I handed my resignation to the factory boss. He sighed, saying it was about time I settled down and enjoyed my retirement. He even gave me a generous farewell bonus. I didn't explain anything, just smiled and accepted it. I took a cab into the city and checked into a hotel. Then, I contacted a local law firm. I submitted all the evidence I had to the lawyer, making only one request. "The fault lies entirely with him. I want him to leave with nothing." The lawyer skimmed through the documents, visibly surprised. Internally, he was probably thinking, even at this age, some people can still play the game. We'll do our best, but it's unlikely you'll get everything. The most we can push for is a 70-30 split. I nodded. That'll do. Please move quickly. Around that time, Ethan finally texted me, likely having returned home to find I was gone. I didn't read it. I blocked his number and deleted his contact. I wanted no further entanglements with him. During the waiting period for the divorce proceedings, I felt an unprecedented sense of calm. Every day, I strolled leisurely through the bustling city center. One evening, after a long day out, I returned to the hotel. Just as I was about to step into the elevator, someone called out to me from behind. "Sophia, right? I'd like to have a word with you." Lily and I sat in the hotel lounge. This was only the second time I'd seen her. The last was decades ago, at my wedding to Ethan. Back then, she had a delicate, demure smile as she wished us a happy marriage. Time had not left its mark on her face. She still carried herself with elegance, smiling as she spoke. "I never intended to ruin your marriage. It's just that the circumstances back then were complicated." I returned her smile. "Oh, so, was it complicated being the other woman for decades?" The smile on Lily's face faltered slightly. She sighed and began recounting her story. "You misunderstood. After I was forced to separate from Ethan all those years ago, I married a butcher who beat me unconscious multiple times. I thought my life was over until Ethan came back into it and rescued me. I know it's wrong, but at the time, I was in such a bad place. His companionship gave me a new lease on life. I just wanted to repay him for that kindness." I remained unmoved. Repaying kindness by being the mistress for years, what a noble method. For the first time, Lily's composure cracked. Her expression turned cold. "Please stop calling me a mistress. It's demeaning. Ethan and I were in love long before you came into the picture. You're the one who took him from me. When my ex-husband was beating me half to death, where was your sympathy? All I wanted was to live a better life, to rekindle my old love and get back on track. How is that wrong?" I nodded slightly. "What you call getting back on track, I call adultery." Lily fell silent for a long moment. She suddenly realized she had to change the subject. Noticing the earrings I was wearing, she remarked, "I remember these earrings. I was with Ethan when he picked them out for you. He's been so good to you. What has he ever done wrong?" "I'm nothing more than a companion he sees occasionally. We hardly meet more than a few times a month. So, what exactly are you upset about?" I raised my hand to touch the earrings, letting out a self-deprecating laugh. These were from years ago, when our son was getting married, and we needed to buy gold jewelry for his bride. I couldn't afford it, so I melted down my own dowry jewelry to create new pieces for her. Ethan frowned at me back then and called me stingy. A few days later, after returning from a business trip, he gave me some new jewelry. I was deeply moved, thinking that after all these years of marriage, it was rare for him to still think of me. Only now do I realize it was just something he picked up while out on a date with Lily. The thought fills me with endless disgust and revulsion. I said, "Since you think he's so great, why don't you keep him for yourself?" She protested, "I told you I have no intention of ruining your marriage. Is that so? Or are you just worried that if I get divorced, I'll take half of Ethan's assets?" I shot back. "After all, if the money stays in his hands, it can still be spent on you. If I take it, your lifestyle might suffer. Don't worry about that. I've provided evidence of his infidelity. Not only will I take the money, but I'll also reclaim all the gifts he's given you over the years." Lily panicked immediately. "How dare you? He gave those to me voluntarily. You. Do I need to explain to you what marital property means?" Lily stormed off, her retreating silhouette eerily similar to the way Ethan fled when his affair was exposed. The lawyer informed me that the divorce agreement was ready. I went out to pick up the contract and returned to the hotel, only to find several people waiting for me. Ethan had brought our son and his family to confront me. When he saw me, he stepped forward and tried to grab my hand. I shook him off and coldly looked at his haggard appearance. It seemed he hadn't been doing well these past few days. "Sophia, please come home with me." "I truly know I was wrong," Ethan pleaded, cautiously watching my expression. He was still wearing the clothes I had bought for him years ago. I had said this outfit reminded me of his youthful, ambitious days. He used to complain about the quality and refuse to wear it, but now, in an attempt to evoke nostalgia, he had put it on. Too bad there's no going back. I pulled out the divorce agreement and handed it to him. Sign it. I have nothing more to say. Ethan glanced at the contract briefly before throwing it aside. He anxiously tried to argue, Sophia, we've been married for 40 years. Do you really not understand my feelings for you? At our age, getting divorced would just make us a laughingstock. I let out a derisive laugh. You've always been a joke. There's no reason for us to drag this out any longer. All these years, you've never truly been on my side. You left me to face all the pressure alone. I thought you were enduring it with me, but it turns out it was just me. Where were you? Taking a deep breath, I mocked him further. When you meticulously recorded every expense, were you worried I'd spend too much and leave less for the women outside? You really are a romantic so generous. Ethan was rendered speechless, hanging his head in shame. All the strength seemed to drain from him in an instant. He struggled to speak, his voice growing quieter with each word. About that ledger, it was just my habit to record expenses. I never intended to make you repay anything. He genuinely regretted everything. At first, when his affair was exposed, the immense shame and panic overwhelmed him, making him want to escape. In the days that followed, he stayed home and went through the ledger from start to finish, finally realizing what he had done over the years. Sophia's contributions had long exceeded his own financial input into the family. She owed nothing. Meanwhile, William pointed to the terms of the divorce agreement, incredulous. Mom, what is this? How can you demand 70% of the assets? Dad earned all of it, how can you take so much? Frustrated, he pushed his two young children forward. Look at your grandchildren. They're still so small and will need money for so many things in the future. You can't just abandon them. The two children, barely old enough for kindergarten, had no idea what was going on. Terrified by the tense atmosphere, they buried their faces in their mother's arms, crying uncontrollably. William ruffled his hair in frustration. What are you crying for? Your grandma doesn't want you anymore. You won't have money for new toys or for a good school district. There'll be plenty more reasons to cry. His words were full of reproach, accusing me of taking too much money and jeopardizing their family's financial stability. His wife, cradling the children, wiped away her tears and said bitterly, Mom, please don't go through with the divorce. Just stay together with Dad. A harmonious family is everything, and your grandchildren need your care. Yes, Sophia, I truly know I was wrong. Please don't divorce me. I promise I'll make it up to you, okay? Urged on by William, Ethan came over to grab my hand, his demeanor nearly pleading. By now, a crowd had gathered, eager to watch the drama unfold. The two children were still sobbing. Under my daughter-in-law's prompting, they pitifully spoke up. Grandma, don't abandon us, okay? We want to eat the braised pork you make. Please come home soon. Everyone stared at me, waiting for me to relent and nod. It felt like I was being dragged into a swamp, with the pressure around me squeezing tighter and tighter. If I didn't resist, it would be easier. But I could hardly breathe. My vision blurred as the image of Ethan in his youth overlapped with the pleading man in front of me now. I knew deep down that our decades-long marriage was laced with far too many traces of Lily. His past belonged to another woman. His future was something I didn't want to be a part of. In that moment, I decisively raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. The sharp sound of the slap finally silenced the whispers around us. Several people stared at me in shock, clearly not expecting me to react this way. I simply looked down at my rough, calloused hands that had spent decades doing housework, juggling countless jobs, and holding up a family alone after my partner shirked his responsibilities. I clenched my fists tightly. From here on, I would only answer to myself. I declared with determination, if we can't come to an agreement on the divorce terms, then I'll file for a contested divorce. When the case goes to court, the disgrace you'll face will be far worse. Ethan eventually agreed to sign the divorce papers. However, he made a few amendments. The assets he transferred to Lily were not to be reclaimed. Instead, Ethan would personally make up for the losses. Additionally, both parties were required to contribute a portion of their assets toward the grandchildren's education fund. I looked at the two children, who had cried themselves to sleep, and agreed to the terms. As for how much to contribute, Ethan planned to mortgage the house he had gifted to Lily. After all, with William's modest income, there was no way he could afford a home in a good school district for the kids. The disputes between adults shouldn't affect the children's future education. I could only hope they would grow up with the right values and lead healthy, fulfilling lives. With the substantial assets I received from the divorce settlement, I finally felt a sense of security. Having lived frugally for half my life, pinching every penny until it felt like I was splitting it into thirds, I now didn't need to worry about budgets anymore. A few days later, I signed up for a group tour to visit the ocean. When my feet sank into the soft, warm sand, tears streamed down my face. When Ethan and I had just gotten married, he had promised to take me to see the ocean someday. But no matter how long I waited, he never had the time. He was always busy, always traveling for work. Then, after William was born, my life became consumed by family obligations. I could never leave, even for a moment. I had to support the household, save up for William's house and wedding, and help raise the grandchildren. The dream of seeing the ocean had long been buried under the endless weight of responsibilities. Now, freed from everyone else's demands, I finally saw my own needs. Overcome by emotion, I wept uncontrollably, unable to put into words the thrill and relief I felt. That day, I simply sat quietly on the beach, watching the sunset and the waves. It was the most relaxed and peaceful moment I'd experienced in decades. During my travels, a video went viral online. It was footage taken outside the hotel that day when Ethan begged me not to divorce him, captured by a bystander. The video's caption read, "So what is love? An old man, dragging his family along, pleading with his wife not to leave him. His desperation is heartbreaking." The video had already garnered over 1 million likes. I opened the comments section, unsurprised to find it filled with criticism. As a neighbor of this family, I can confirm the old man spent years scavenging to support them, only for the wife to cheat and demand a divorce. Everyone in our neighborhood knows about this awkward laugh. At the scene, the 2 kids, her grandkids, cried until their faces turned red. The grandmother was ruthless enough to abandon them all. I don't understand. With so few years left in life, is divorce really necessary? This is what happens when you marry the wrong person. Men, take note, this broke my heart. It reminded me of how my grandpa loved us so much, but when he got sick, my grandma ran away instead of taking care of him. She ruined our family. The video's popularity continued to climb. Watching it left me feeling utterly deflated. How could these people, who knew nothing of the truth, spread such baseless lies so easily? Then, William sent me a link to the video via text. Shortly after, he called me. "Our advice never gets through to you. You insisted on divorcing Dad, and now look at the consequences," he scolded. "You've brought shame to yourself and to us. The neighbors are all laughing at us now. If you have any decency left, just come home and live quietly." I was speechless. I couldn't understand how my son had turned out this way. I asked him, "Your father cheated on me for decades and is finally making it official. Do you expect me to go back and congratulate them?" William shamelessly replied, "You could move in with us instead. Help out with the kids." Dad and Aunt Lily wouldn't say anything about it. I instantly lost all desire to continue the conversation. Did he seriously think I'd willingly serve them after knowing everything? I'll make sure to clarify this matter. It's the ones who betray their marriage that deserve public condemnation. How can you clarify anything? You're an elderly woman. How could you possibly understand how the internet works? Just keep quiet. In a few days, people will move on, and our family can't afford to be dragged into this mess anymore. So I'm just supposed to bear the brunt of all the insults, huh? William, do you even have a heart? I'm your mother, and I'm the real victim here. I shouted this through tears, furious, and hung up the phone. When he tried to call me back, I immediately blocked his number. But then I was left wondering, how could I even begin to clarify things? My voice was too small. No one would care about the feeble explanations of an elderly woman. People only empathize with tragic examples from their surroundings: the abandoned, the divorced, the pitiable. After thinking for a while, I decided to go with the flow of the internet's trends. I would stir the waters, draw people's attention and emotions toward me. I organized the photos I'd taken during my recent travels and posted them online with the caption, "I am one of the parties involved in this divorce. I don't regret my decision. After receiving a few $1 million in the settlement, I'm living quite happily." After posting, I gritted my teeth and spent several $1,000s on boosting the video's visibility. With the help of data algorithms, netizens quickly found my post and began spreading it around. As expected, my provocative words caused an uproar, sparking waves of insults and attention. Both the comments and the follower count skyrocketed. I was quite satisfied with this result. Now, all I had to do was wait for the peak of the buzz to release evidence of Ethan's infidelity. Simultaneously, I was waiting to see if he would reach out to me first. By late afternoon, my video had already made it onto the trending charts. Ethan had likely seen it by then because he called using my daughter-in-law's phone number after I'd blocked both him and William. Through the phone, his voice sounded utterly exhausted. "Sophia, could you please delete what you posted? Stop fueling this drama online." I sneered. "It's not you being insulted, so of course you're indifferent. I have only one goal, to prove my innocence." Is this really necessary? After decades of marriage, do we really need to end things in such an ugly way? Actually, Lily's been urging me to make our relationship official these past few days, but I haven't agreed. "Sophia, as long as you're willing, this spot has always been yours." Hearing this, I wasn't moved, I was disgusted. I scoffed. "And you think you're being romantic, huh? You think you're so desirable, like everyone wants a piece of you. Only flies buzz around a pile of dung. You and she are the perfect match. Anyway, I'm just giving you a heads up. Tomorrow, I'll be releasing everything publicly. You'd better brace yourself." With that, I hung up the phone and stood silently by the window. After blocking this last contact method, I let out a deep sigh. I knew I had made the right choice. Even if I were to live this life over 1,000 times, I would never settle for less. But hearing the words of those I had once been closest to it still felt like the damp, piercing pain of a rain-soaked day, where the ache creeps in like countless tiny needles. I realized it would take me a long time to heal from this. Before leaving this city, I uploaded a copy of the evidence I had previously compiled for my lawyer onto the internet. Overnight, my account had already attracted countless followers. So when I posted the new update, people quickly came to view it. Unlike the last time, when the insults poured in like a flood, this time, many women were speaking up in my defense. I never insulted her. Finally, the truth comes out even when I saw the leaked video before, something felt off. That old man looks healthier than I do, while the older woman seems worn out and exhausted, clearly someone who's worked herself to the bone. How could she possibly be selfish or cruel? Oh my God, turns out he's been cheating for decades and exploiting his wife on top of that. Every single thing he did challenges the sanctity of marriage. I feel so bad for her. Imagine the kind of resolve it must have taken for her to choose divorce. Some people fall apart just over a breakup. Even if the man cheated, didn't he still provide for the family? This woman is how old now? Is it really fair for her to walk away with so much of the money? That old man is a champ. He's been taking care of the woman on the side all these years. Makes me feel guilty for only giving my girlfriend a couple thousand a month, haha. The internet was full of opinions, some supporting me, others spinning conspiracy theories. More absurdly, there were young women openly admiring Ethan's behavior. They posted photos of themselves in the comments, flaunting their youthful beauty, complaining about how hard life was, and begging to be taken care of. Some men even started picking from the comment section, saying they could afford to support a few more. I couldn't understand these people's mindset, so I casually reported them. How could anyone think wealthy men are easy to deceive and willingly throw themselves into the fire? While traveling to the next city, my phone was bombarded by calls from reporters. They all said they wanted to interview me, but I rejected them, one by one. Unable to reach me, they turned their cameras toward Ethan. They went straight to his home and captured footage of him and Lily enjoying a cozy, loving moment together. Ethan appeared calm and humble as he said to the reporters, "I believe that finding true love again in one's later years is a rare and fortunate opportunity. I have no comments on the online rumors about me. Justice lies in people's hearts. I hope everyone can stop disturbing my and my partner's lives." Lily stood tearfully by my side, pulling out her worn-out medical records and sobbing in front of the camera. If it weren't for Mr. Ethan's help, I might not even have the chance to sit here today. He saved my life. Underneath this interview, a comment was upvoted countless times. "I'm a very kind person. I can't bear to see women outside suffer, but my wife, that's fine." I silently liked the comment. 13 overtime. the matter gradually faded from the public eye. I didn't pay any more attention to it. During one of my travels, I found a group of like-minded old friends. We shared our stories, recounting the hardships we'd endured in our marriages. We all agreed it was a blessing to have escaped the miserable past and finally be able to enjoy some peace in life. One calm afternoon, one of these friends showed me a piece of news and asked if I recognized it. I looked at her, puzzled, and then turned my gaze to the screen. As it turned out, Lily had stirred up another mess. Ethan and Lily had registered their marriage. They probably didn't have the guts to throw a big wedding, inviting only close family and friends to a small ceremony. Somehow, Lily's hot-tempered ex-husband got wind of it. He showed up with a group of people, demanding compensation, claiming he had no idea he'd been played for a fool decades ago. Lily also had a son from her younger days, who started shouting about getting a paternity test. After all, nobody could really say for sure when exactly Ethan and Lily started their affair. The son had every reason to suspect he was the product of an extramarital affair, Ethan's illegitimate child. He even declared he had the right to inherit Ethan's assets. While ranting, he dramatically dropped to his knees, crying out, "Dad, I've failed to fulfill my filial duties all these years. Let me make it up to you now. But first, please give me $50,000 to pay off my debts." Ethan was still too shocked to respond when William completely lost his cool. Imagine being middle-aged and suddenly discovering you have a wild brother competing with you for the family inheritance who could stay calm. The two men started brawling on the spot, both ending up with bloody faces. Relatives from both sides rushed in to break up the fight. Lily's ex-husband, being as volatile as ever, seized the chaos to grab her meticulously maintained hair and slapped her across the face. He cursed at her loudly, spouting vulgarities. "If someone hadn't told me, I'd never have known you had been cheating on me all along. I hadn't even divorced you back then, and you were already sneaking off, living the good life with someone else. You shameless creature." Ethan tried to step in and stop the commotion, but was shoved so hard he hit his head and immediately passed out. Fearing someone might die, the whole debacle was forced to end. After rushing Ethan to the hospital, Lily's grown son grabbed some of Ethan's hair for a paternity test. The results eventually came back, showing no blood relation between them. Lily's hot-tempered ex-husband, realizing there was no advantage to be gained and fearing legal trouble, reluctantly returned to his hometown with his son. Lily wept bitterly, feeling wronged. William and his wife could only shake their heads, speechless. It was at this point that everyone finally realized just how devastating the consequences of infidelity could be. The idea that things would be fine after decades of keeping a low profile was a naive fantasy. The truth was that such actions were always disgraceful and despicable, destined to be exposed one day. And now, they were reaping the bitter fruits of their own betrayal. 14, when Ethan regained consciousness, he could barely speak. The blow to his head had caused a cerebral hemorrhage, compressing his nerves. Conservative treatment was the only option. In just a few days, his vitality was completely drained, and he seemed to age decades overnight. Lying on the hospital bed, he reached out as if trying to grab hold of something, but his hands found only empty air. His cloudy eyes filled with tears that wouldn't stop flowing. Lily took care of him for a few months. Then she disappeared. Just as she had always claimed, she only wanted to live a better life. When her ex-husband used to beat her, she turned to Ethan for comfort, seeking a way out of her misery. Now that Ethan needed someone to care for him in his twilight years, and with the last of his money spent on treatment, she took the remaining funds and vanished. William, furious, confronted her. "You can't be this heartless. My dad needs your care. You promised to repay his kindness. What do you think you're doing now?" Lily retorted with righteous indignation. "I've been his mistress for decades, wasn't that enough? Otherwise, I could have remarried when I was still young." And with that, William filed a lawsuit against her for fraud. What happened afterward remains unknown. What was certain, though, was that each of them eventually faced the consequences of their actions. I felt a deep sense of relief, grateful for my decisiveness. I hadn't clung to the marriage out of sentimentality or fear of severing ties after so many years. I left the mess behind quickly and thoroughly. Later, someone asked me how I had made up my mind. Was I not afraid of regret, they asked, after spending so many years together? I replied, He could never extinguish my will to pursue freedom, not even at 70. 15 Epilogue. I am Ethan. I've never lacked women pursuing me, but I chose Sophia in the end because of how good she was to me. When we were dating, she often hesitated to let me spend money on her. I'd ask if she wanted gifts or flowers. She would always shake her head, saying no, that she didn't like such things. I feel fortunate to have met a woman like her. She's different from the rest. Others always expect me to give more, to spend money as proof of love, while they guard their own wallets tightly. My first love, Lily, was like that too. I used to spend money on Lily, but she never reciprocated and constantly complained that what I gave wasn't enough. We eventually parted ways. Not long after, she got married. I heard her husband didn't treat her well, and I felt sorry for her. But my marriage wasn't much better either. Everything in life seemed to come with a price tag. Sophia changed over time. She used to say she didn't want my money, yet when I gave her my entire savings as a dowry, she still wasn't satisfied. She kept asking for more, always reaching out for money. Money, money, money. Why does everyone have to keep asking for money? She became no different from the others, and my love for her gradually wore away. I started keeping track of expenses, noting down how much she took from me. I tried hard to find a balance, since she had once promised that things would be fair. So when she asked me to buy a fan, I waited a while before asking her to cover the water bill. If we went out for dinner, I'd ask her to buy some fruit or tea to offset the expense. Only then could I feel some sense of balance. When Lily reached out to me again, she had changed a lot. Her eyes were red from crying, and she begged me to help her leave her current situation. She said I was the only person she could rely on. I softened and agreed to help her, and eventually, our relationship rekindled naturally. Lily became gentle and considerate, telling me how hard it must be to support the family. She suggested I keep some secret savings and not disclose my financial situation to Sophia. Otherwise, Sophia would feel entitled to be a stay-at-home mom and keep asking for money. I smiled wryly and agreed with her. After all, Sophia really was like that now. Back when she asked for a dowry, she claimed it was a security for childbirth. But now, she wouldn't touch it for medical checkups, guarding it tightly instead. As expected, once money fell into her hands, she became calculating and defensive. I realized I needed to think carefully and prevent her from developing the habit of always asking for money. My relationship with Lily grew stronger. Whenever I felt upset, I would go to her place for dinner. She always gave me a good experience, and compared to that, I found myself less and less willing to go home to Sophia. I was tired of seeing her gloomy face, tired of hearing her complain about her boss docking her pay again, or about our son needing money for a school trip. If I were her boss, I wouldn't hire someone who left early every day to pick up their child. It's too disruptive to the workflow. So I'd send her a little money along with some encouragement. Times are tough for everyone. I'll contribute 2 months' worth of cigarette money. Let's make an effort to save together. Later, through my own hard work, I made a fortune. It was a major turning point in my life, a stroke of luck that I attributed to Lily. When I was with her, everything always seemed to go well. I felt sorry for her following me without a title or status, so I decided not to let her down and to share my success with her. She was always understanding, never asking for anything directly, unlike Sophia, who frequently complained about money running short, new fees she had to pay, or our son needing money for tutoring. I was thankful I had listened to Lily's advice and kept my wealth a secret from Sophia. Otherwise, she likely wouldn't have worked harder to improve herself. With money in hand, Lily and I lived an even happier and more comfortable life. I loved going out and traveling with her, and I started avoiding going back to that other house. I thought I would carry on like this, indefinitely traveling the world with Lily and seeing all the wonders the globe had to offer. But then Sophia found out everything. She threw that ledger at me, and I felt an inexplicable chill run from the soles of my feet to my heart. I didn't know why I felt guilty or afraid, as if I had done something wrong. But wasn't everything between us fair? She gave and I reciprocated. Why couldn't she just let it go? Why insist on divorce? After all these decades together, couldn't we move past it? Was it really just about money for her? Did her talk of equal contributions only serve to deceive me? Was my refusal to give her more something she couldn't accept? In the end, I agreed to split my assets with her. thinking of all the years we had spent together. But why wasn't that enough for her? Why did she still hold on to her anger? I had a fleeting moment of regret that I hadn't been upfront about everything earlier, regret that our marriage had bound us unnecessarily for 40 years. Eventually, I couldn't resist her demands any longer and signed the divorce papers. When I looked around the house that was so full of traces of Sophia, I felt a pang of reluctance. After Lily moved in, she erased all those traces, but I began to miss Sophia. I realized I had grown accustomed to her presence. Sometimes, when I was home and heard Lily's voice, I'd startle and instinctively look for Sophia. But she wasn't there. She was truly gone, unwilling to return. Had I made a mistake? Why had things turned out this way? I should have gotten rid of that ledger. I didn't want Sophia to leave me. My head hurt. Was that William speaking? I struggled to make out his words but caught only a few. You brought this on yourself. Yes, I brought this upon myself. I'm sorry, Sophia. If this is karma, I accept it.